Hi everyone. So I have been having not the best planty week over the past week. Anything and everything I feel like that could go wrong has gone wrong. Honestly, if you've been here for a while, you'll know I did a reenactment video of a week of epic planty fails a while back. I think it was probably almost a year and a half ago. And so, that's a pretty long time to go without feeling that way again. But this past week, I kind of feel like I did that week, only a tad bit more annoyed. So I'm going to tell you about all of the things that have been going awry in my planty life over the course of this past week. And we are just going to start with the most ridiculous one because it relates to the last video I released. So in my last video that I released for you guys where we were doing plant chores together, we started off the video by checking my Hoya Wilbur graves, which, just a reminder, is living right up here above the monstera here. And we had gotten my new microscope out from Beaver Labs, which that has been a blessing this week, let me tell you. But we got that microscope out, we checked it out, we checked the plant, no flat mites, yay, 100% happy about that. Well, fast forward 2 days later, I am in the kitchen watering all of my plants, and I get to above the kitchen sink, checking all the plants up there, and I get to my cyclamen. It is the last plant that I need to water that day. I pull it down. I'm starting to take a look at it, realizing that I have not really been staying on top of removing the spent flowers off of that plant like I usually do. So I decided I'm gonna remove the spent flowers first, check for any yellowing leaves, get those off of there. And then while I was doing that, I was like, dang, it must have been a while since I dusted the pollen from the flowers off of these leaves. They look really like coated in pollen. Like I better have like wiped these down too, which is weird because usually I will at least blow the pollen off while I'm watering the plants. So it really threw me for a loop. Yeah, well, there's a reason it threw me for a loop, you guys. I went to wipe the pollen with my thumb and no pollen came off. And that's when I realized the leaves were miscolored and I had a moment of panic. And my first thought, of course, was spider mites because it did look kind of mottledy, like speckly, sort of, kind of. And remember, the cyclamen is a pretty thick leaf too, you guys, so it's going to present a little bit differently on a cyclamen leaf than on, like, for example, a thinner, like, for example, like Alocasia bambino type leaf or something like that when spider mites attack. But yeah, I was like, you've got to be kidding me, because I have maintained a spider mite free home with the exception of back in, I think, late October. I found spider mites on 2 cuttings that were in water above the sink, but there were none on any of the other plants up there. I just rinsed and treated the cuttings before I potted them up because when they're not in soil, you guys, it's a lot easier to eradicate spider mites because when they're in soil, they can lay eggs in the soil and hide in the soil and like all that kind of stuff. So I felt pretty good about that. Had been taken care of. I hadn't seen anything else funky going on with anything above the sink since then. And like I said, that was at the end of October, maybe like even mid-October. So I thought we were in the clear. So now I was like totally freaking out, like, and it was affecting quite a few leaves, but they were all also, you guys, on the side of the plant that was facing the window. So it's not like I would have noticed it, could have noticed it sooner, because if it had been the leaves that were facing towards the kitchen, like, you know, when I'm doing dishes and things, like maybe I would have glanced up and noticed something's not right. But because it was the side that was facing the window, it probably went on longer developing than it would have if it had been on the other side. But yeah, so I'm panicking and I'm thinking, crap, spider mites again. Are you kidding me? I don't want to deal with this. And I have a ton, or I guess I should say had, I'll elaborate in a second, a ton of plants propagating in water up above the sink, you guys. I probably have some footage that I've caught somewhere from filming that I can flash in here for you. But the kitchen counter, like the counter above the sink, was just jam-packed to the point that I had some plants propagating down below in jars of water as well. So I'm just like, oh my God, like how many plants is this potentially affecting? However, I then took a breath and realized another key fact, and that is that I wasn't seeing any webbing on the leaves on the cyclamen. And for the amount of damage to the leaf I was seeing, I definitely should have been seeing webbing if it was spider mites. And that's when I had the realization that, oh crap. And I went and I grabbed my handy dandy new microscope that's getting a lot of use this past week. And I started going over those damaged looking leaves like very slowly all the way across each leaf, and wouldn't you know it, you guys, I discovered flat mites. So yay, we don't have flat mites on the Wilbur graves, but not yay, we have flat mites on the cyclamen. And this is the first time I have had flat mites, you guys. And so for those of you who are not aware, like flat mites, I feel like flat mites were not even a thing until like about a year or so ago. And all of a sudden, everybody started having flat mites problems primarily on their Hoyas. Like I feel like when it started being talked about a lot, it was always people's Hoyas, and it kind of made me feel like maybe there were just a bunch of these Hoyas were being perhaps imported from the same company or area or something, and they all had flat mites, and it was like everybody was checking and treating their Hoyas for flat mites. We weren't really hearing about it that much on other plants, but you guys, they can be on pretty much any kind of plant. The reason that they are called flat mites is because they are a bit, I think, flatter, if you will, than a spider mite. They are still a mite, like spider mites are though, but sometimes they are actually, I guess more often, honestly, they're referred to as false spider mites because they look very similar to spider mites. However, I have had so much experience with spider mites, as many of you are aware. That is the #1 pest that I have had problems with in my plant journey, that I knew right away when I was looking under the microscope at this that it was not a spider mite. I then immediately picked up my phone and reached out to all the Planty people I know on Instagram and was like, okay, I know you've had flat mites before. Send me pictures of your flat mites just to confirm, and it was confirmed. They are 100% flat mites, you guys. Ugh. Not happy about it. They are harder to see with the naked eye even than spider mites. You pretty much have to have like a microscope to find them, and they don't create webs, which is why I was not seeing webs, which also makes it harder to figure out what's going on right away, because the second you start seeing webbing on a plant, you know like you've got spider mites, right? So yeah, not happy about it. I immediately started cutting off the highly damaged leaves because I figured they were the most infested and throwing them away. But you guys can see here, like this is what the damage kind of looks like. It's messing with the coloring of the plant. In this particular plant's case, it's kind of almost making it look kind of silverishy, if you will, or kind of dusty, I guess. Like that's why I was saying I thought like initially like maybe it was just the pollen on the plant. But yeah, I just, oh my gosh, like I was not happy. It was late in the day, early evening, and I just sat there, you guys, and I started right away checking all of the rest of my permanent plants with the microscope, the permanent plants in my collection that live above the sink. Good news is I didn't really see any, but I mean, they're tiny mites. They could have, like, I could have just missed a crevice or something. So everything's going to have to get treated, and we'll get to that in what I'm going to do exactly in a second. But after I finished checking the regular plants, I just sat there, you guys, and I looked at the number of cuttings I had in water. Some of them had not started to develop roots yet. A lot of them had, and I was just honestly overwhelmed. So overwhelmed that I finally made the decision that I was just going to trash them all. And never before in my life, you guys, have I thrown plants with healthy roots on them in the garbage can. It hurts my soul to have done it. There was one point where I was like, what if I just post these for free and let people know they might have flat mites? But I was like, I don't even want to deal with that right now because I would have to figure out where I was going to sequester them while waiting for people to claim them. So it all went into the trash. It was a lot of plant to be putting into the trash. And then I went through the process of thoroughly cleaning everything with 409 and Windex above the sink. And then I put all of the regular plants in my permanent collection back up there, so that is where they're hanging out now. However, around this point is when I had the dawning realization. There are so many similarities in the story I'm telling you right now as there are with that past video I mentioned I had made for you guys where I was doing the reenactment of my epic Planty fails week, because that was one of the last really bad spider mite outbreaks I had. Was one of the big things that happened in that video, and same thing happened. I thought I had treated everything I needed to, and then I made the realization that crap, there's other plants that have been in contact with that cyclamen that are now living elsewhere in my house. So 2 hours before this, I had actually started potting up some plants that had roots, and I was like, I'm just gonna do a few each day, whatever, get these potted up. So I had potted up some plants that were up there and put some of them on the propagation carts in my kitchen that I have set up, and I put some of them in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet. Yeah, like I said, you guys, I'm not happy about these realizations. Now, the good news is my cabinet is emptier right now than it normally is, so luckily the plants weren't close enough to be touching anything else. And another nice thing about flat mites compared to spider mites, you guys, is that they don't move nearly as quickly. They're much slower movers, they don't spread as fast, so I feel pretty confident having immediately, once I made this realization, run and grabbed all those plants out of the cabinet. I felt pretty good that they didn't have time to spread in those 2 hours. Plus, they were probably pretty happy. I didn't see any damage on the plants that I potted up, so if there are flat mites on there, they're probably happy enough they weren't going to just go try to get on some other plant, if you know what I mean. Unfortunately, the ones I put on the cart were touching other plants. So yeah, I've had to sequester all of those plants they were touching away, and I did check one of the first plants that I took back off of the carts in the kitchen. I checked it with a microscope. It did have a flat mite on it. Since I had already potted them up, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and just try to treat those ones. So I think it's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 of the plants I had potted up. I pulled and I have them separated away upstairs in my workout room since I don't keep any plants in there regularly. And I put the cyclamen up there in a separate area farther away from those plants. And so they are quarantining up there. I then, after throwing away all the plants and being very sad about it, made a not fully thought through, very rapid order of beneficial bugs to treat the flat mites. So the same predatory mites that we use to treat spider mites can be used to treat flat mites. So I went ahead and placed an order with Nature's Good Guys for their special blend, which is a variety of different types of predatory mites. And those are supposed to get delivered sometime, actually, today. Let me make sure they didn't get delivered and are sitting outside and I need to bring them in. They have not been delivered yet. So as soon as those get here today, I am going to be distributing those mites amongst everybody. I just can't, you guys, this whole thing has just stressed me out. So I did get enough mites to treat. I got the live mites because that's what you want in the bottle first for active infestation. So I got that to treat all of the plants, even though I didn't see mites necessarily on the plants in my permanent collection that I left in the kitchen. I did get enough mites to treat them just preventatively, just in case. Definitely got plenty to treat all the ones I saw flat mites on upstairs. And then I did get some hanging sachets of the same mites to put on various other plants around the house, just in case, because I don't know how long the flat mites have been there. And I can't remember every single plant that I've potted up since potentially there were flat mites. So we're just doing a preventative measure everywhere. And for all of you who always tell me, well, if there aren't flat mites on a plant or a spider mite, let me try that again. If there aren't flat mites, spider mites, or whatever on a plant for beneficial bugs to eat, then they're going to die. Nature's Good Guys actually does now sell supplemental food tabs to help keep your beneficial bugs alive longer. So I went ahead and splurged on some of those too. You guys, it was like $100-something order of beneficial bugs and various things for the beneficial bugs. So that is what is going to be happening later today. I will probably splice in some footage of distributing the mites and everything for you as well, since I'm recording this video today. Why not? But yeah, so that has not been fun. Super not excited about that. Good news is I'm still not really seeing signs, knock on wood, of any other kinds of pests going on in my house. I am going to put a beneficial bug sachet on Blanche, my white fusion calathea that lives in my bathroom, because you know she is just, spider mites in particular just want her so bad. And it was around this time last year was the last time that I had a major outbreak on her. So we're just going to go ahead and be preventative and give her some as well, so that I don't have that headache or another crappy week in a few weeks where suddenly everything is going wrong in my bathroom. But yeah, so that is the most recent and highly stressful thing that's been going on this week. But there was other stuff that led up to it, which is probably why I also was just so overwhelmed and ended up throwing away those plants. So let's go back a little bit further to the start of the week, when I decided I was going to film some bits and pieces for some upcoming videos that I'm doing for you guys. And one of them is a video I'm working on for moss pole alternatives for you guys. And I've been super excited for this one. I've actually been working on it and kind of coming up with my theories of various different types of poles to use and how can you make it work as well as moss, and all these fun things have been going on since probably late November, honestly. And so finally I was like, all right, let's start experimenting. Yeah. Experiment number 1 did not go well. So you're probably not going to get to see full experiment number 1 in that video, but I'll let you know right now exactly what happened and why you're probably not going to see it in that video. I'll probably still at least mention it in that video so you guys know why it's not going to be one I recommend. So a lot of you guys had told me, use your regular aeroid mix. You can use it in a pole. It'll work fine. Well, the problem with that is trying to keep it damp enough because it's not something that's going to stay wet as long as moss. But I did discover a video from Planty in Green, who actually discovered it from somebody else who I can't even remember right now who it was. It might have even been, I want to say maybe it was the Lekka Queen. But that just doesn't sound right because I don't know why she would have been using an aeroid. Well, I guess she could have been. Might have been her, might have been somebody else. My apologies if it wasn't her, that I can't remember who it was. But they had finally said like a way around that, or to help the plant still root into the pole as quickly or more quickly than it normally would using just a regular aeroid mix, is to simply take saran wrap, basically plastic cling wrap, and wrap it around the node where you want it to root in, because that will help to trap the moisture in to that aeroid mix that's in that pole. Sounds great, you guys, right? Sounds fabulous, and I'm telling you right now, they proved it worked. So if you want to try it, try it. But here's the problem I had. It was a bloody mess. It was a bloody mess. Like every time I went to water the plant, like everything was falling out of the pole through the grid on the front. And could I have potentially gotten a smaller grid pole? Yes, but I was using a D-style pole with a solid back to you guys. So at least it was only on the front where stuff could come out. But so much stuff was falling out that the pole started out like almost completely full to the top. And by the time I just said, screw it, earlier this week, it had gotten about to where it looked about this empty on the top. Like that's how much had fallen out. It was just a nightmare. And honestly, I wasn't really seeing any activity starting to happen where I had the saran wrap wrapped around it. It just looked awful sitting in my kitchen on the Monstera Esqueleto that I decided to use it on. And so I just scrapped it. Too much of a mess for me. Now, I did try something else new, so you still will be getting that video, and I'm happy to report that the new thing is going way better. So new thing is probably going to be my recommendation. But yeah, that whole experiment, I was just like, this has been a waste of my time. Like, ugh, it's a hot freaking mess. And then trying to empty out that pole and get all the cleanup done from that. I mean, my kitchen has been so dirty this week. It's not even funny, you guys. But yes, so that was like epic fail number one. Then later on in the week, I decided, you know what? I want to go ahead and do a notching experiment, a new notching experiment with a slightly different method on my Aphelandra squarosa. So that is my, what is commonly referred to as a zebra plant. Mine had gotten very tall, very lanky looking because it had lost a lot of its lower leaves. But honestly, it was just getting really top heavy, you guys. Like, and even if it still had a lot of its lower leaves, it was just getting a little bit too, we were running a risk of flopping over, right? So I was like, all right, well, I want to do several things here. Like one, I want to try this notching experiment, but two, I've never actually propagated it. So I decided I was going to cut one of the branches, because there were four, one of the branches off and propagate in water and let it just start to grow new growth from there. And then I was going to try to notch the other branches with this new method. So I go to start notching it, you guys. I've got footage for you. Why don't we just watch? Well, you guys, I did not expect that to happen. This was a little bit harder to just notch through than I thought it was going to be, and I somehow snapped it off. So I guess we'll be propagating what we took off here, and then maybe I will try again more gently on one of these other ones, but now we're really top heavy. Ugh. Yep, totally just managed somehow to snap that entire branch off. So that became the branch that I was going to propagate in water, you guys, which was not the most ideal situation because it was on the side that was the least lopsided heavy side. So now it made the side that was the most lopsided heavy side even more lopsided and heavy. So I tried to do kind of like a shimmy thing underneath the nursery pot in the cover pot to kind of like tilt it up so it would tilt the other way a little bit so it wasn't at risk of falling over. And I went ahead and did my notching experiment, but then I went to go to bed that night and walked in the room and found the plant toppled over on the floor, and of course where I had notched, it completely snapped that branch in two. Not happy, you guys. At that point, I just basically gave up on the notching experiment on that. Like, I don't even, now I'm in the, like, how am I gonna salvage this plant to looking anywhere remotely decent? I did not want to remove half the plant. Think about it, you guys. I just unintentionally removed half of the amount of foliage on that plant. not happy about this, right? And those were two of the propagations that I had above the sink to test out propagating that plant for you, but they're now in the garbage because flat mites. Like I said, it has been a bit of a crappy, stressful planty week for me. So I don't know what I'm going to do with the Aphelandra squarosa now. Like, right now I'm just letting it be, and I'm hoping that it's going to start to develop new growth off of the branches that are no longer there. And if it does do that, and I say if because it still has foliage on the other two, and I just don't know how much energy it's going to put into new growth on the old branches, or if it's going to put more energy into keeping the leaves growing on the new ones. So we'll just have to see what happens. I have a feeling it's not going to happen super quickly with that plant. It's just a hunch. But yeah, if it starts to get new growth going on it, then I will assess like chopping and trying to prop the other two branches at some point. But for now, like, that is a failed, stalled experiment. But speaking of experiments, let's talk about, well, 2 videos ago, I think now, or video before last, I did my video on pH in your plants for you guys. And in that video, we did test the soil in my Calathea rosapicta medallion using the 2 different testing methods that I outlined in that video. And at the time, you guys, like, I just showed you that one test, but I did test multiple of my plants to see A, if my soil was good in all my plants, like in pH range, and B, to see if the meter that I was using to test versus the actual, like, take a soil sample and mix it up with some things test, to see if they were kind of coming out the same in terms of how greatly they varied between the two, and it did. So that's why I didn't address all the other plants that I had tested in that video. However, I did not actually test every single plant in my house because I just didn't have time that week. And I tested did a few samples, and the soil was good, and it's the soil I use in a bunch of the other plants, so I figured we were okay. Turns out we are not okay. All right, so here's what happened. Once again, I was watering because I have been on top of my watering, like I told you guys in last week's video. So I was in my bedroom, I was watering my plants in what I like to call my Calathea corner, and I was looking at my Calathea cancina, aka Calathea Freddy. And you guys know I've been having problems with Fred. Like, Fred wants to flower all the time during the spring, summer, and even fall, and then just wants to have leaf issues primarily in the winter before any new growth will start to happen. So the last time I talked about the problems I was having with Fred, one of you had actually messaged me in that video and said, clearly you have a pH problem. And I had said, I don't think so, because Fred's in the same soil as like all my other Calatheas now, except for maybe, I think I have one maybe that's still in my basic mix. And I was like, but none of my other ones are having problems. So if there was a problem with my soil mix, it would probably be happening to a lot more plants than just Fred, right? And then they had come back and said, well, clearly you must be repotting him every few months to fix the pH issue. That's the reason he's still alive, which I was kind of like, well, I don't repot him every few months, so that doesn't make sense. I did, however, repot him a few months ago because he was starting to get a little root bound, and I thought maybe that would help resolve his issue, but it really hasn't. So while I was watering the plants, I was sitting there and I was staring at Fred, and I was like, I didn't test his soil. So I went and I got the little meter just because it was the quickest thing to do at the time, and I put it in there, and oh my God, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, I then had to go test it using the other testing method because I was so shocked by what I was seeing. Do you see this, you guys? That is ridiculous. I mean, that is crazy alkaline, you guys. I was shocked, super shocked. So I then proceeded to go around and test every single other plant in my house because I was just curious, and it's just Fred. I do not understand why it is Fred. It is just crazy to me because, like I was explaining in that video, normally our problem is our soil has become too acidic because of all the things that happen in it, not that it's become overly alkaline. And overly alkaline, that fix is sulfur, which, as I mentioned in that video, is a crazy slow process because it's a biological process. And I'm only having this problem on one plant. So I'm like, I'm not gonna try to like repot him and fix the soil with sulfur and wait, and oh my God, I don't even know, you guys. So I've decided that perhaps I will try one of the home remedies for you guys just to see if it actually works, since it would be a simpler solution. I am going to tell you right now that in my research, because a lot of you are probably telling me coffee, water it with coffee. In my research, you guys, like, that seems to be a myth, but while trying to resolve Fred's issue, we will put that myth to the test. But if anybody else has any home remedies that you might want me to try out for making soil more acidic, drop them in a comment down below, because this would be the time to do it, and fingers crossed we don't kill Fred. Oh my gosh, I still am just baffled, you guys. I am baffled, and I'm pretty sure I removed all of the original soil from him. It's not like there's original soil potentially in the middle of his root ball that maybe that was just alkaline to begin with. I'm 100% baffled. If anybody has any ideas, also drop comments below for that. But yeah, so that was a shocking little revelation. Good news is Fred has not actually started to flower yet this year, and this is actually the first time he hasn't flowered this early. Last year he started flowering again in February, so at least we're not going to apparently be flowering nonstop. Okay, next up, I had to make a list, you guys, because I was worried I was going to forget something. Next up, that one. Okay, so we are coming up on almost a year of me having ordered in my first shipment of plants from Aroid Asia for my rare plant pop-up shops. I do still have some of the plants that I ordered in. I forgot to mention this when I was talking about the flat mites. So the majority of the plants that I had to throw away, you guys, were just propagations or cuttings that we had taken from my regular plants. There was like some philodendron micans propping there in water. There were some pearls and jade pothos cuttings that were propagating in water, some syngonium white butterfly. However, we did still have 5 of the Monstera cobra standardliana plants propagating water, and you guys, they finally started to get roots. All of them were starting to get roots, and I had just potted up 4 of them earlier in the day, 2 hours before I discovered the flat mites. So like I said, those I ended up keeping. They're quarantined upstairs. But the other ones, I was just like, I took the microscope to them, I found a flat mite, and they still have curled up leaves because they haven't gotten roots yet. And I was like, there could be so many mites living in those curled up leaves. And I finally was like, I'm just gonna have to throw them away, even though technically I'm throwing away money because I actually paid for those plants. It's not like the cuttings that we just took off of the plants in my house. So that one burned a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I was not happy about it. There was one Monstera albo that's still been rerooting in water from like the dry rot situation, I think. Oh no, that one got damaged during the fertilizer burn situation. That's still been rooting in water, and I did find 1 flat mite on it, but like I said, because it's rooting in water and it has broad leaves, pretty easy to eradicate. I just like treated it with pest spray, scrubbed it down, wiped it down, went back over it with microscope. I don't really see anything anymore. So I put it back in water and sequestered it away somewhere else as well, because I could not bring myself to throw away what I think I paid $94 for. So it was not happening with that one. But yeah, so I still have a few plants from the original orders. And one of the plants I had from the very first order was one of the philodendron gloriosums that I had gotten, and it was the biggest one, the biggest, nicest one, and I've had it for almost a year now, and I just couldn't figure out why nobody wanted to buy it. Like, I kept dropping the price as the price was going down for those plants in this area and everything, and I don't know, like, I guess everybody already had them, maybe? I don't know. But nobody wanted to buy it, so I've been taking care of it the same way ever since I potted it up. It's been in the same pot, and I don't know what happened, you guys, but I noticed when I was watering plants in the kitchen last week that it was looking a little bit weird and it was starting to lose leaves, and I looked and some of the roots were not looking their best. Some of them still looked okay-ish, but I was like, what's going on? Like, I haven't been letting it dry out more than normal. I haven't been watering it sooner. Like, what is happening? Like, I could not figure it out. And so finally I was like, all right, I think we've got root rot going on. I need to take this out of the pot and see what's going on, remove the rot, see if I need to put this in water to develop new roots, whatever I gotta do, right? So the stolon, so that is the modified stem for a crawling philodendron like that, that is the part that crawls and roots along the ground, was approximately this long in that pot. That's how long it was, approximately how long it was when we got it, because I think that plant only gotten about maybe 2 or 3 new leaves since I got it. But yeah, nice and long. And I go and I look and I'm like, there is a lot of rot here and I don't really understand why. I was still confused until I flipped the stolon upside down, and the entire underneath back part of the stolon was rotted through. And I don't know why, you guys, because it was not fully buried in the soil. And this is one of the things that I have mentioned, is that if you are going to bury a stolon, because you can, in the wild, you guys, they're going to get buried over time. Leaves are going to fall on top of them. They're going to get buried. So it's not like a question of like, oh, I buried it and that was the problem. Now, obviously you don't want to bury it too deep because that's not how they're used to living in the wild. They don't want to be like 6 feet underground. It's not a rhizome, it's a stolon. So I had mine sitting though right on top of the soil, so I'm still baffled at how this happened. I'm thinking maybe there was already a small rot spot starting that I somehow missed when I potted it up. That's all I could come up with, and then it had spread. And it had spread so far, you guys, that by the time I was done, this is what I was left with. This little chunk right here, like basically single node of that giant gloriosum, is all that is left. I did have to remove all of the roots as well because all of the roots were behind here, and that's where all of the rot was on the stolon. Now I do have good news. We have started to develop a new root. Hopefully you can see it right there. So we are starting to get new roots in water. I just have it in this little shot glass until that gets a little bit longer. And then I will try to find, I think I have a taller shot glass I can put it in so there's more room for that root to develop without submerging this entire chunk in the water. But yeah, was not happy about that, you guys, but I think we're gonna be okay. Like I literally had to cut it almost right to the edge of where the rot was though. So I did also treat this in a combination of hydrogen peroxide and water. I think I actually did a 1-to-1. Just normally I do 2-to-1, 2 parts water, 1 part hydrogen peroxide, but it was so close to it. I was like, we're just gonna do a 1-to-1 for the extra little kick to try and kill off anything that is going on there. So hopefully this will make a recovery. Like, you guys, it's been a week. It's been a week. Like I keep saying, it's been a week. However, I would like to potentially end this video on a positive note because circling back to the Hoya Wilbur graves, which kind of started this whole video off talking about how happy we were we didn't have flat mites on that before discovering them on our cyclamen and other plants, I did notice when looking at this plant yesterday that I think it has developed its first peduncle. And for those of you who may not know what I'm talking about, Hoyas, when they flower, they develop what's called a peduncle first, and then the flowers actually come out off the end of the peduncle. You never want to cut off the peduncle. It will continue to bloom repeatedly year after year from that same peduncle. So leave it there. When the flowers are spent on Hoyas, they will fall off fast. You don't have to cut them off. You just find them on the floor. So I'm pretty sure, like, you guys are seeing it. Let me know what you think. If this looks like it is the start of a peduncle. If it is, I'm super excited. This will be my second Hoya in my collection to bloom. And that makes me super happy and makes me think that maybe, I'm looking at some of the ones in this room right now, maybe the rest of them are starting to get ready to start doing some kind of blooming as well. And maybe this will be the year of Hoya blooms for me and it will make up for this past super crappy week. But I will be sure to keep you guys updated on all of these woes and how they are going along. Hopefully you guys have had better planting weeks than me. I hope you've enjoyed this video though. If so, please be sure to click that like and or subscribe button down below. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next time. Aloha!